Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. Orphan Black is back. I totally didn't catch season 1 till after it aired, so I didn't do videos for that, but I'm going to do weekly videos for each new episode of season 2. So, in case you're not caught up, I'm going to do a super quick recap of season 1 before I do my top 5 moments. If you are finding me for the first time, I do a ton of BBC shows like Doctor Who, Sherlock, and now obviously Orphan Black. Be sure to subscribe to get everything. It's going to be a lot of fun. So right away, here's my super quick recap of Clone Club season 1. We're introduced to the dyad-clone conflict via Sarah, and even though the perspective shifts based on which clone is in a scene, I always thought of her as being the main protagonist of the series. Rachel and Dr. Leekie are essentially the main villains, until we find out about Helena, who kind of becomes a second big villain, but that only really comes out near the end of the season. The dyad is essentially trying to advance human genetics and make it so that they can literally own human DNA, clone DNA really, but essentially it's implied that big pharmaceutical companies will start owning people like you and I would own possessions. Really bad for everyone. Because all the clones are essentially like a beta trial that the dyad is running, they've been monitoring them, but then Helena comes in and basically tries to start taking them all out, killing them one by one. So think of the dyad villains as an allegory for Big Pharma pushing the idea of self-directed evolution through science, and Helena at the other extreme as the religious zealot who's completely opposed to the idea of evolution. The clones are essentially the collateral damage in the war between Helena and the dyad, so they have to band together to survive, which is where we get Clone Club. So now that we're caught up on season 1, let's break into the episode. So here are my top 5 moments. Careful for spoilers if you haven't seen it yet though. But number 5, Allison goes shopping. I love Allison so much. I have a feeling that she's going to be my favorite clone this season. The shopping scene was just hilarious, and in case you missed it, every time there was an Allison scene after this, they used the same funny music cues. Like the music would go from really serious to light and funny, meaning that all the comedy in this episode, and maybe as we go on through the season, is going to come from Allison's character and all her scenes. You get this real sense that Allison is a reluctant participant. She's the only one with a traditional home situation, so even when she Skyped in for Clone Club later in the episode, you could see her ironing her family's laundry in the background. It was just hilarious. But now we have to talk about her play. Number 4, Allison's amazing play. The play itself is just a really funny meta story for Allison's role in the fight against the dyad, as well as the callback to season 1, a la cleaning up unfortunate bodies. I love how they called back to Felix's Cats moment about the name of the play, as in, this play is definitely not Cats. Who else actually listened to the lyrics they were singing? It was all about plasma leaking on the floor and cleaning up blood. It kind of harks back to Cosima and Delphine with the blood samples, and as much as I think of this as being Sarah's story with the other clones just kind of passing through it, that's really not true. Orphan Black is kind of like the overstory of all the clone stories, so that every time we jump to a scene with a different clone, there's always references to what's happening with the other clones. So you'll never see a scene with a clone that doesn't reference another scene with another clone. They're all connected at a fundamental level, so all the stories inside an episode have to be connected at a fundamental level. And the play is just a funny meta way of showing that. So for instance, the play, some of the lyrics talk about cleaning up unfortunate bodies, like Sarah having to clean up Katja's body. It gets super confusing when you think about the idea of having each scene call back to another scene with a different clone, and maybe even something that happened in season 1. So high fives to the writers for keeping the story so complex and so interesting, without getting buried under its own weight. Number 3, Sarah tricks Daniel with Allison. Like I said, Allison, amazing in this episode. But this was one of the funniest attempted abductions I've ever seen. It was hard to tell if Allison actually knew what was going to happen because it seems like she was surprised. She was Skyping in while Sarah was planning on how to get into the dyad, but I think they just cut her out of the conversation whenever they were setting her up as a distraction to get Daniel away. Quick side note though, I did feel like this was a really good anti-kidnapping PSA, even though they eventually did get her into the van. So, in case anyone ever tries to abduct you, 1, blow your rape whistle, and 2, at the same time, pepper spray the shit out of anything in your field of vision. Even though Daniel did let her go, they totally deserved to get maced in the face. Allison did say that she wasn't keeping guns at home anymore, but I was surprised that she didn't have one on her. And I thought it was kind of funny that she, accepted Daniel's apology as she slid out of the van and kind of gave them the finger on the way out. So, getting a little bit more serious. Number 2, Dr. Leekie's speech at the dyad. There was a lot going on at the party, but it was Leekie's speech that really interested me. He basically speechified the entire history of the dyad and how far their organization reaches around the world. So it was started in 1918, and now it's got labs in over 100 countries with over 27,000 employees. It's essentially the personification of big faceless pharma, the big faceless villain, even though they do technically have faces. Remember, Leekie's mission is all about self-directed evolution, something that ties into the philosophy of neo-evolutionism, which is kind of takes on this religious aspect. That's the real reason the clones exist, and why they called Kira a biological goldmine. Leekie believes she's the next stage of evolution. The clones, on the other hand, are technically imperfect because they've been breaking down. In case you missed it though, whenever Rachel was meeting with the Koreans, they actually literally spell out their plan for owning human DNA, like owning people. And my number one moment, Helena is still alive. This was like the major WTF of the episode. Sarah and Art put the pieces together after he kind of explains what was going on with the diner attack, but I like that they called them religious zealots. They look creepy even when I thought they were just working for Rachel. I mean, who buttons that top button without wearing anything around their neck? Matt Smith's doctor would be rolling in his grave. Helena's plan though seems pretty simple. Just kill all the clones. Right now I don't think she has any grand design like Dr. Leekie. She just literally wants them all dead. I don't think she wants to hurt Kira though, but she might kill Mrs. S. While this was all going on, I checked the Orphan Black hashtag on Twitter, and my feed was just littered with Helenas in all caps, just all Helena, all caps. But let me know what your favorite moment from the episode was. Was it Allison's hilarious play, or the Helena reveal, or something else? And let me know, who was your favorite clone in the episode? Obviously mine was Allison. So before I get to my review, here's a couple more really important plot points that I didn't want to include in my, top moments, but that are really important that we need to keep up with. First off, Cosima and Delphine, who is playing who the best? Cosima is definitely on Team Clone Club, but there's this whole spy versus spy thing going on with Delphine working with Leekie to get Cosima on their side. I think underneath it all, Delphine isn't as genuine as, say, Art, who's trying to get Sarah to trust him. When you think about it, Delphine didn't realize she was kissing Sarah till after the whole run-in with Leekie. You'd think that if you were in love with someone and had been in a relationship, you'd know if the person you were kissing was someone else. Plus, Sarah's hair wasn't even the same. Maybe Delphine is just the worst girlfriend ever though, but as for Art, I think he's going to be a force for good, even if he's technically not on Team Clone Club, and the same goes for Paul. Paul's playing both sides, but I think he really does care about Sarah, but I really don't think any of these relationships are going to end well, Paul and Delphine. Overall, I gave the episode a solid A-. It was an amazing entry into Season 2, especially when you consider that the hardest job the show has right now is topping itself, topping Season 1. Last year was so good, it's going to be so hard to top, which is where Helena steps in, the WTF moment at the end. I think part of the solution to the problem, and the episode kind of explained it beautifully, or Rachel explained it beautifully, is that they go international. Season 1, on the other hand, was relatively self-contained geographically. Remember how Rachel was asking Paul those questions about speaking Mandarin and going to Taiwan? This also kind of ties back into Leekie's speech about the Diet having offices all over the world. The story of Season 2 is just going to be told with a much more global context. The only thing I thought could have been done better in the episode was Felix's story. He, just like Allison, was a well of comedy they used to drive the plot forward, but Allison's scenes were so good that they just made Felix seem like a throwaway character this week. Like he was just kind of like a silly fool. Although I do kind of think of his archetype, his character, as the fool, not in a bad way. But let's talk about the Clone Club scenes real quick because sometimes those are the most interesting. I kind of go into hyper-aware mode whenever all the clones are together in a scene. I kind of think of them as different aspects of the Freudian psyche, like one clone is the id, one is the ego, and one is the superego. I guess you could also think of it in terms of subconscious and conscious minds, but let me know if you agree. Like when they're all together, they're a whole person, they're like pieces of a single person. But let me know what your final thoughts are on the episode. I'm really excited for this season, and like I said, I'm going to be doing weekly videos, so be sure to subscribe to get it. It's going to be every Saturday night that I'll be posting them. But tomorrow is all about Game of Thrones, so just to get you guys ready, here's my review of the last week's episode, and you can click here to get my latest Doctor Who Series 8 video. Thanks so much for watching, I'll see you guys tomorrow, high fives.